Chapter 2. Applying the main principles to learning and memorizing the Arabic alphabet and vocabulary. This chapter explains the complete system for creating and using a 28-letter memory palace system for Arabic. By this time, you've already created at least 10 locations for yourself based on places you remember with ease and, ideally, fondness. You've made sure that all of the material has charted them out either on paper or using an Excel file for testing purposes, and that these list at least 10 stations within the 10 locations. Memorizing the alphabet. In order to memorize the Arabic alphabet, we first need to create a memory palace that has 28 stations. At first glance, the Arabic alphabet is completely unlike our English alphabet and bears more relationship to Hebrew. We will cover how to deal with this, but for now, we'll need 28 stations in a memory palace specifically designed for the Arabic alphabet to cover them all. 28 stations in a memory palace may seem like a lot, so I invite you to claim your free subscription to the Magnetic Memory newsletter. www.magneticmemorymethod.com/sign-up. In addition to the magnetic memory worksheets, you will find literally dozens of ideas to help you build your memory palaces effectively if you struggle with the ideas presented in this book. I answer questions from readers and frequently offer special promotions and free gifts that enable people to memorize foreign vocabulary in ways that are easy, fast, and fun. There are also the previous volumes of Magnetic Memory newsletters available for Kindle. Please see the back of this book for more information about 700-plus pages of information about improving your memory that I have created, and even some ways that you can get these back issues for free. In order to remember the sound of each letter, we need to create both a visual picture of the letter and an action that helps trigger the sound so that we can orally reproduce it. However, in order to do this, some memorizers will benefit from an additional technique, one that is discussed in other parts of this book but should be introduced now. The principle of homophonic transliteration. This principle is far too underutilized by those exploring and implementing the magnetic memory method. Yet homophonic transliteration is an exceptionally simple and useful technique. It involves translating, or more properly put, transliterating words in your target language into how you would spell them in English. Homophonic means literally to make something sound the same. Trans means to move something from one place to another, as in transit. And to literate is to represent a word by spelling it using a visual alphabetic system. You see different forms of homophonic transliteration in many books and websites, and you'll notice that I've given English equivalents on many occasions in this book. However, here's where many people fail to see the full power of homophonic transliteration. You can and should make your own homophonic transliterations. Listen to the sound of a word of a letter of the alphabet, and then write it out as you feel it should be spelled. This will transliterate the word or letter into your own personal inner representational system, and allow you to use the associative imagery and location-based memory technique you are currently learning at an even higher level. The best way to explain this further is to simply invite you to take a tour into my memory palace, where I used homophonic transliteration to quickly memorize, store, and recall the Arabic alphabet with ease. Use a familiar location. I use the high school where I attended grades 11 and 12. It was very easy to find 28 stations for this memory palace by following the magnetic memory principles laid out in this book. To briefly repeat them, I start at a terminal location that ensures I will never be trapped and carefully construct my journey so that I do not cross my own path. Although memory palaces used to store alphabets are what I call limited set memory palaces, which is to say that they do not need to be extended to include more stations later, I still obey the principle of being able to add on new stations if I want to. For example, in the case of Arabic, I might want to memorize some of the letters that used to be in the Arabic alphabet, but were later removed, and there is also the issue of final, medial, and initial placement of these letters within words. Graphical representations of the alphabet you can work on memorizing on your own once you've learned the basics of the magnetic memory method. There's another reason to make sure your memory palaces are open-ended. By having more places to add, you avoid memory palace claustrophobia, which is a merely psychological problem some of my coaching clients have had. It's the feeling that there isn't enough space for the images they have created. I've even had some people who use more than one station to memorize a single letter in the beginning. And for reasons like this, it is always very useful to add one more station. With all of these matters covered, let's begin. Although I don't expect you to follow along on my journey as if it were your own, I want you to get a sense of how you can do this for yourself by charting out 28 separate stations in a memory palace. Your goal is to learn and then emulate, not learn and try to copy. Draw from your own personal mythologies, interests in pop culture, and other inner imaginative resources. When you work in a relaxed state, you'll find that you have plenty. Before starting on your own memory palace, it's important to do what I have done. Walk through an area you are intimately familiar with and see it as vividly in your mind as you can. Then go back through it and identify 28 different stations and chart these out using a top-down list, an Excel file, or a map that you've drawn for yourself. You will use these for the purposes of testing your memorizations based on the image-action associations you'll be building for yourself. For the purposes of this example, Memory Palace for the Arabic alphabet, I'm going to show you the stations by name and number, the Arabic letter, and the image action I used to memorize how it sounds. If you would like to hear how the alphabet sounds and have a graphic representation of it before your eyes as you listen, please visit http://learn101.arabic_alphabet.php. In fact, it is important for you to listen to a native speaker pronounce the alphabet because some of the ways I will describe the sound will help, but not necessarily play out the same way in the ears of your mind as they do in mine. As with many parts of the magnetic memory system, your participation is required, and a great exercise is to listen to a native speaker pronounce the letter and then imagine and write out a visual representation of the letter as you hear it in your mind. You can catalog each letter and the images you will create to memorize how it sounds in an Excel file, as demonstrated in one of my videos. If you're listening to this version of this book, and you do not wish to type this YouTube link, simply put in Metivier, Metivier, YouTube Excel file Memory Palace into your favorite search engine, and the video should come up. I also want to point out that we'll be looking at the isolated forms of the Arabic alphabet letters only in the following example walkthrough. Once you've learned the system, you can easily apply it to memorizing the other forms if you're not already automatically able to recognize them in their final, medial, and initial forms, which I think you'll surely be able to do if you use the magnetic memory method correctly. Representative Memory Palace for the Arabic Alphabet. Important. These examples are for representative purposes only. In order for the magnetic memory method to work for you, it's important to practice coming up with your own images. If you really focus on the vibrancy and strangeness of the image examples I'm giving here, and place them in a memory palace of your own that obeys the principles discussed previously, you will undoubtedly experience massive results. However, in order to truly experience the abilities of your mind to memorize foreign alphabets and vocabulary, you need to draw upon your own pool of references. G.I. Joe figures and Quentin Tarantino movies may mean a lot to me, but nothing to you. Therefore, you need to personalize this abstract information and make it meaningful to your mind by drawing upon elements from your own life. Finally, please note that these examples are based on a standard pronunciation that does not reflect regional variations. Moreover, these letters take different forms depending on where they appear in a word. Please use the examples in this section to develop your own strategy for memorizing the different versions of these forms, so that we can focus on the main elements of the technique. 1. Outside of front door, pronounced alif or ah. To remember that in Arabic is pronounced ah, I see my doctor forcing a tongue depressor into my mouth and telling me to say ah. Following the magnetic memory principles, I make the image large, bright, colorful, and filled with action. It's not just that I have the wooden stick in my mouth. I see him forcing it into my mouth, deeply exaggerating the action. This makes the image doubly memorable. If I needed to memorize the alif sound, which I don't because it relates to so many other sounds of the first letter of the alphabet, ranging from our own alphabet to the aleph in Hebrew, I would see Weird Al in the chair next to me, getting a facelift. Al plus lift triggers the sound alif. If Weird Al means nothing to you, pick another Al, either a friend or celebrity, like Al Pacino. 2. Inside a front door, pronounced ba. This letter is pronounced something like ba, perhaps like a ba-ba black sheep sound. To remember what this letter is pronounced ba, I see sheep the horns of a bull charging at another sheep. They're all shouting ba, ba, ba. 3. Heather's locker. I'm traveling to the right in my memory palace version of this high school. Ta. This letter is pronounced something like ta, with the ah slightly elongated. In this image, I see an otter, tap, tap, tapping a mussel shell on his chest with a stone. 4. Janitor's office door, tha. This letter is similar to ta, but is pronounced tha. To remember that the letter is pronounced in this way, I see the band Take That crooning away beside the Thames River. 5. Tommy's locker, gym. This is the equivalent of ja, as in Jacques in French, or Zsa Zsa Gabor, with a slight M sound at the end. To memorize this, I see Zsa Zsa Gabor slapping Jack Nicholson dressed as a Frenchman with a bottle of jam in his hand. The jam jar has marks on it. Following the magnetic memory method principles, I see the image in large, exaggerated, vibrant colors. The action is also extremely exaggerated with speed and zaniness. It takes only 1 second extra to focus on adding this important element to the image. 6. Front of gym entrance door number 1. Ha. This is equivalent to the ha sound in ha-ha. To remember it, I see my friend Heather laughing ha-ha-ha with an A-shaped snake in her hand. Notice that by bringing Heather into this second image, I am capitalizing on the coincidence that her name starts with H and that she was in the previous image. This is the principle of compounding in action. 7. Directly inside the gym entrance door number 1. Ha. This letter has a ka sound with a thick back of the throat H sound to start things off. To memorize this, I see Heather with her snake again. This time the snake is wearing a hat and eating special K cereal, much to Heather's distress. 8. East side basketball net. Dal. This letter is pronounced more or less like dal. To remember this, I see A. 9. North wall bleachers, east side. Thal. This letter sounds very tricky, sometimes almost like it starts with a th sound, as in them or then. To remember this, I see a man with his head floating over his shoulders, kicking at the letters T and H while making the thal sound. 10. West side basketball net. Ra. The R of this letter is rolled to make an ra sound. To remember this, I see a small comma doing extremely large drum rolls on a comma-shaped snare drum. 11. Equipment locker. Zain. Zay. This letter is pronounced za or zany. To remember this, I see the comma again. This time he's got a Z-shaped hat that he's doing his drum rolls on. 12. Inside of gym entrance door number 2. Sin. This letter basically sounds like the previous, but with a sa sound instead of a za sound. To remember this, I see a snake with an enormous saw cutting through the gym door. 13. Outside of gym entrance door number 2. Shin. This letter sounds like Shah. To memorize this, I see the snake again. This time he is dressed like the Shah of Iran. 14. Dino's locker. Tsad. Also pronounced like sa. It can have a slight T sound at the beginning and slight D sound at the end. For example, tsad. I remember this letter by seeing the comma again, this time carrying a sawed-off shotgun. 15. Mr. Sheely's classroom door. Dad. Pronounced da. I see the comma with the shotgun shooting Tristan Tzara, who is said to have founded the Dada movement in art and poetry. Before I continue, I want to make a note about using classrooms and rooms in general. One of the principles of the magnetic memory method is that we don't cross our own path. A lot of people have asked me over the years, how can one enter a room and then leave it without crossing one's own path? I think it's best not to enter the room at all. Simply stand in your imagination at the door and peer into the room without actually walking through it. You still create a continuous mini-journey in the room, but you don't actually walk into it. For more tips and tricks like this that will expand your knowledge of how to avoid common errors and confusion, visit http://www.magneticmemorymethod.com/free-magnetic-memory-worksheets. Now back to our regularly scheduled alphabet. 16. Sheely's blackboard at the back of the room. Thaw. In Arabic, sounds a little bit like thaw or tha, as in how a magician might say, ta-da. In order to memorize this, I see a snake emerging from a magician's hat with Mr. Sheely as the magician saying, ta-da, with the emphasis on tha. 17. Sheely's classroom window right side. Zaw. This letter is very similar to, but has a zaw sound. Thus I see Bach helping Sheely now zawing at the snake, which is wearing a medallion that gets in the way of the zaw. 18. Sheely's classroom window left side. Ein. This letter is pronounced like I, with a bit of an N at the end. I see the musician and songwriter Ike Turner punching Tina Turner in the eye, which apparently is something he really did. He also has tattooed on his forehead, and this is the same shape as the black eye starting to form on Tina Turner's face. It's worth pointing out that with some of these letters I am creating vignettes or small story sequences that bind them together. I did this with the letters in the gymnasium as well. This practice is not strictly necessary because the journey from station to station binds the images you create perfectly well. However, there is a compounding effect when you add layers and connections that, when created with the proper focus on amplifying the colors, size, and vibrancy of the images, will strengthen the string of information as a whole. 19. Mr. Sheely's desk. Guyane. Pronounced something like Guyane. I see a co-worker I used to have who came from Guyana. His tugging on my friend Jan's tie, that is, Jan. Jan's tie looks exactly like, and it takes just a second to exaggerate the image with bright colors and zany action. 20. Mr. Sheely's world map. Fa. Sounded like fa in this image. I see Freud poking his shaped pipe at the map, telling the world that it needs to come to grips with its father. 21. Dave's locker. Cough. This letter basically sounds like cough. I see my friend Dave at his locker, his mouth open, as Dr. Freud appears once again, this time with a shaped tongue depressor. He asks Dave to cough, that is, cough. 22. Staircase door. Calf. This letter basically sounds like calf without the L. At the staircase door, I see a young calf trying to eat a small snake resting on the belly of a larger snake. The way these two snakes attack the calf back isn't pretty, but it is very memorable, so I never have to worry about being able to recall the sound of this letter. 23. First 10 stairs. Lamb. From calf to lamb is not such a stretch in and of itself, but to lock it into memory, I see the calf now biting the shaped tail of a lamb as it tries to walk up the stairs. The lamb, 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 crying of the lamb reinforces the memory. 24. Staircase landing. Meme. This letter sounds like meme, so I see Richard Dawkins, so famous for popularizing the word meme in his books. He's walking with a shaped walking stick and preaching the good news about memes. Being that he is an activist atheist, seeing him preach anything like a biblical prophet is quite shocking and entirely unforgettable. 25. Next 10 stairs. Nun. This letter sounds like noon, but with a much harder U sound. In this image, I see a nun with bullhorns piercing the pages of the novel Darkness at Noon. Noon. 26. Top landing. Ha. This letter sounds like ha. I see Happy Smurf bouncing a tear-shaped ball on Hamlet's head. 27. Top stairs door, pronounced as wah. Happy Smurf is now playing guitar with his foot on a wah-wah pedal shaped like this letter. He's playing a heavily wah-affected version of What's the Story, Morning Glory by the band Oasis. The letter wah and the solution I came up with is a perfect example of why you need to come up with your own associative imagery based on your own personal pool of pop culture figures. The more you draw upon material that means something to you, the stronger these associations will be, and the more rapidly the target information will come to your mind in combination with your use of the location-based memory technique. 28. My locker. Ya. Pronounced ya, it's a simple matter to see a snake racing over 2 eggs in front of my locker and shouting ya for victory. We've reached the end of the Arabic alphabet and memorized each and every letter. Memorizing the alphabet. Conclusion. Now that you've seen how I created my memory palace journey for memorizing the sounds and some of the additional symbols of the Arabic alphabet, you should be able to do the same. This process took me approximately 45 minutes from start to finish. Once you're done, you should be able to mentally walk through the entire alphabet and correctly pronounce each letter both forwards and backwards. In fact, moving forwards and backwards is not only great proof of how powerful the use of memory palaces can be, but is also great exercise for the brain. However, please make sure that you do this creative work in a state of relaxation. Relaxation accomplishes 2 things. First, being relaxed will make it easy for you to come up with the imagery you'll need to infuse the abstract new information with associations that are meaningful to you. Second, it will eliminate any frustration, apprehension, doubt, or negativity you feel when it comes to using your memory. So many unproductive attitudes about memory abound that it can be easy to let them derail us. Relaxation will melt all of that away. Creating your memory palaces for each letter of the alphabet. The next step, once you are familiar with the alphabet, is to create a new, individual memory palace for each and every letter, so that words which begin with these letters can be stored along the carefully composed journeys you've already learned to make. Here's how I work whenever setting myself up to memorize the essential vocabulary I will need to operate in a new language. First, I create a folder and then create multiple Excel files. Excel works the best because it eliminates the need to build a table in a Word document or struggle with erasing on pencil and paper as I work. However, you may prefer using a regular document or a piece of paper. Although you will soon not need these lists, they are incredibly valuable visual aids and used for the purposes of testing your memorized material. In this case, the files, or individual sheets of paper for each memory palace needed to create, corresponded to the 28 letters of the Arabic alphabet. In the following example, I will show you what my selected locations for Arabic are. Please note that I'm not including any of the variants in these examples. You can, however, easily adopt the magnetic memory method to memorize the various placements of the Madda Hamza, Wasla, on, for example, Aleph, as part of your own study. I will also give some examples of how I've done this for myself in other parts of this book. Alan's house, Bonnie's house, Tom's house, Teresa's house, James' house, Hal's house, Cain's house, Dawn's house, Dave's house, Riverside Pool Hall, Zeller's department store, Sandra's apartment, Shane's house, Saul's office, my Hebrew tutor to mix things up a bit, Dad's house, Tapper's pub, sauna, and the SEK Recreation Center in Berlin, Ian's house, Gary's house, Frank's apartment, Kane's office, Carl's house, Lisa's house, Mom's house, Nora's house, Owen's house, Sean's house. He loves wah-wah pedals for guitar. Jan's apartment. Notice that nearly every memory palace belongs to the house of a friend. Doctors' offices also work great, as will any contained space with which you are intimately familiar. Building stations within your network of memory palaces. As always, design your journey from station to station in such a way that you do not cross your own path and that you do not trap yourself. Always leave yourself with the ability to add another 10 stations in each location. For some letters, you may need up to 500 stations or more in order to achieve boosts of fluency in Arabic. If you find it difficult to imagine how you could ever come up with 500 stations or more in a single memory palace, subscribe to the free newsletter and discover dozens of ideas that will show you how, in addition to the ideas found throughout this book. I've got dozens of resources for you, including the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, which features interviews with language learning experts like Luca Lampariello and David Mansuret. Visit me anytime at www.magneticmemorymethod.com. In the meantime, here's a very important point. As you are trying to come up with each location to link with each letter, let yourself relax. Your mind has the perfect associations for you so long as you don't force it. If you can't think of something that is totally fitting, such as Ian's house, just let your mind do its work and go with whatever feels right. You do not want odd or awkward associations that cause you to stumble in your thinking. You want the associations to be natural so that you can move fluidly through your mind when searching for the words you have remembered. Obviously, the need for relaxation will be the same for anyone. When it comes to speaking and understanding what you hear or read, you will often need to do this in real time. It is therefore important not to hinder your progress by using forced associations that you will forget or struggle to work your way back to. That will take the fun out of everything. We relax while memorizing to train ourselves to relax during recall. It's pure Pavlovian conditioning, but it works. Here are some suggestions for memory palaces that go beyond the homes of your friends and relatives. Movie theaters, churches, art galleries and museums, hotels and hotel rooms, restaurants and cafes, university and college campuses, workplaces, hospitals, medical clinics, dental clinics, and any place where you can create a linear journey using the techniques taught to you in this book. As a word of caution, however, I've listed the practices of doctors and dentists because I personally find them useful. However, if you have any negative associations with such places, do not use them. If a memory palace distracts you from the task at hand because it brings back painful memories, it is probably not ideal for use in this context. The one exception here is that you can use painful memories to make great associative imagery that will be memorable, so long as you can do it in the spirit of humor. For example, I once had a dentist foul up a very painful procedure that then needed to be redone. Because I'm able to use the material in good spirits, that station, the dental chair in his clinic, is one of my most powerful spots for placing material that I want to memorize. A sample memory palace. To demonstrate how you can build out each memory palace location by creating a journey of at least 10 stations, let me walk you through an example using the Arabic letter 4, which is represented by my friend Alan's house. My first 10 stations for Arabic vocabulary are: Number 1, Alan's room, the terminal location. Number 2, upstairs bathroom. Number 3, staircase. Number 4, living room. Number 5, dining room. Number 6, the kitchen. Number 7, front entrance closet. Number 8, front entrance guest bathroom. Number 9, the front entrance. 10, the driveway. What I've done here is select a terminal location within the house and then worked my way out to the driveway. This means that I do not have to cross my path and will not get trapped. Once I've used these 10 stations, I can easily add another 10, assuming that my memory of the short walk to the subway system is strong. I could also skip to the subway system if need be, and from there I have a strong memory of all kinds of stops that can be used for storing words. Of course, using the principles of preparation and predetermination, you will have carefully assessed the suitability of your memory palace for this letter before starting to use it. Before continuing, let me note that 3 of the keys to success with the magnetic memory method are working alphabetically, using word division, and wherever possible, deploying bridging figures. Why work alphabetically? There are 2 main reasons to memorize words alphabetically. First, you develop a compounded understanding of how the language works, and you see relationships between words. Second, as you'll see, the alphabetization serves as an additional mnemonic trigger. These procedures mean that we memorize words in groups based on not just the first letter of the word, but also the first 2, 3, or 4 letters. In the case of Arabic, for example, there are numerous words that begin with, followed by, in its medial form, which looks like. When creating a memory palace journey that focuses just on words that start with just the letters and which will appear in reverse order, we give ourselves an extra mnemonic device. We will never struggle to remember how exactly a certain word starts because we know several things. Number 1, we know that the word is in our memory palace. Number 2, we know that it is in the area of the journey. Another thing that word division allows us to do is create bridging figures. For example, the sounds of these 2 letters together could remind you of a character from an Austin Powers movie. I think of that exceedingly fat guy with a Scottish accent who is always saying "Ach no" when he doesn't like something he heard. By using word division and having this character move through the memory palace with each word that begins in this way, we essentially create yet another aid to memorization. We cannot help but think about how the beginnings of these words sound because they are always associated with such a memorable bridging figure. Thus, focusing on words that start with the letters that match our bridging figures maximizes the memorization while limiting the potential for confusion as we rehearse the words we've memorized in our memory palaces. Were we to clump random words together, we would need to remember which word came next blindly, or at least without some form of arbitrary connective tissue. However, when we know that there are a number of words and we place them in order, doing so aids and strengthens the associations. It also assists recall for reasons that will become clear when you start using the magnetic memory method to memorize Arabic vocabulary. The best part is that when you use a bridging figure, you can have that character interact with images that you create to help you recall the sounds of the rest of the word. I'll show you how. But for now, Notice how, in the example that follows, I have greatly simplified my memorization by choosing to simply move from one word to the next in what amounts to basic alphabetical order. Due to the combination of associating the information with a location and gathering words that are alike in terms of their alphabetical similarity, I do not have to struggle with remembering what will come next. And nor will you. Why? Because in combination with the location-based memory palace strategy, word division, bridging figures, and associative imagery, you've multiplied your chances of recall so completely that when you're working in a state of relaxation, it will actually be impossible for you not to remember the sound and meaning of these words. And when you work in a state of relaxation, it is rarely, if ever, a problem to come up with the kinds of radical images you'll need to create your associations. Make them large, wild, vibrant, colorful, and exploding with action. The first word that combines, and we will use in this short example, is. This word means either to bring, and using the principle of homophonic transliteration, I have rendered it for myself Akahadora. You'll need to come up with your own homophonic transliteration, and I recommend that you do. By writing out an anglicized or Englishized version, you're not only making it easier to place the word in a memory palace, it takes no more than 5 seconds, but you're also deepening your familiarity with the sound of the word as well. It sounds crazy to suggest this in a world of computers, but if you can write your homophonic transliteration down on paper with a pen or pencil, the effect will be even more intense. Note: you do not have to do this in order for the magnetic memory method to work. However, it is a good step to take, and I recommend it. To remember that means to bring, I place Fat Bastard from the Austin Powers movies in Alan's bedroom, because the sound of the word Akahadora reminds me of a fedora. I have Humphrey Bogart bring such a hat and place it on the floor. He gets his hands out of the way just as Fat Bastard starts jumping up and down on the hat, shouting. Moving on, I want to learn. This word means sometimes, and the homophonic transliteration that I've created for it is spelled Akahainen. Following my carefully prepared and predetermined journey through this memory palace, I place in the upstairs bathroom of Alan's house. I now see Fat Bastard wrestling with a hyena. Please notice something here. There is no one-to-one correspondence between the sound of hyenen and hyena, but it's close enough in my mind to trigger what I need. To get more specific, I stuff the hyena's mouth with Japanese yen. Thus, the ak shouting Fat Bastard plus hyena plus yen, akahainen, or question. What's missing in this equation? As you can imagine, there's no point in memorizing the sound of a word without its meaning, although it is still useful to have that skill when using a mnemonic strategy, like the magnetic memory method, because you can always go back and compound more associative imagery in order to get the meaning into the image. For example, now that I'm very easily able to say by decoding the associative imagery I've created with Fat Bastard, the yen, and the hyena, it's easy for me to include a stack of New York Times newspapers in one hand and see him asking for some of the yen as he holds out the other. Yes, he's doing this while wrestling the hyena, which makes the entire vignette even stranger and more memorable. We can now boil this procedure down to the simple equation we've seen before. Location equals word. Image equals correct pronunciation. Action equals meaning. There are many more example memory palaces coming up later on in this book. I have given you these few examples for now to get you started on thinking about the possibilities that await you on your journey towards greater fluency with the Arabic language. Remember, Carefully plan your journey in advance. Assign a memory palace to a single letter. Focus on word division and bridging images, such as the fat bastard character who moved from station to station in order to help create memorable continuity in combination with the principle of word division. And always, always, make sure to exaggerate everything. People who neglect this department suffer inferior results. There are 4 other problems that you may encounter, so in order to help you avoid them, I've created a podcast for you called 5 Ways to Ruin a Perfectly Good Memory Palace. You can download it for free here. www.magneticmemory-method.com/magnetic_memory_method_podcast_001. Finally, look for ways to adapt these methods to your own style and comfort. If any of the images or short vignettes I suggest work for you, by all means use them. In my experience, however, each of us needs to take the principles of the magnetic memory method and use them to create our own images. The more the associative material comes from within your mind using your own creativity, the more memorable the target words will be for you. Just make sure to always use exaggeration and action in combination with location. Focus on vibrant and zany associations within carefully selected memory palaces that do not require any effort from you in order to make a journey from a terminal location, one that never requires you to cross your own path or become trapped. This is the key to experiencing success with this method. What about memorizing the Mada, Hamza, and other orthographical marks? For alphabetical elements like the Mada and Hamza, I suggest setting a rule in each and every memory palace, one that is consistently used. Take, for example, the Mada that appears above Alif. Although each person needs to come up with their own personal images to ensure maximum memorability, one suggestion is to think of it as a hat, in this case, a French cap. A Hamza, on the other hand, is more like a French-Canadian toque. For Hamza and Mada that appear below the letters, you can think of them as shoes. The important element here is that these hats or shoes are bright, large, colorful, and filled with exaggerated movement in a way that combines with the rest of the associative imagery in order to bring back the coded information in the most effective manner possible. Some people who have been in contact through the Magnetic Memory newsletter have used color coding in addition to a visual element, like a wave, for help with tonalities. I recommend experimenting with this technique. However, do not fear abandoning color additions if the technique proves too abstract. Concrete images are always stronger. This procedure for memorizing tonalities strongly relates to memorizing articles in any language that uses them, such as using a boxer or boxing gloves for masculine nouns, a skirt for feminine nouns, and if the language has them, fire for neuter nouns. The important issue with using extra memory palace elements to remember and use hats and shoes, or whatever you might come up with, consistently. Any time you add an image for fixed figures like diacritical marks, gender, number, or markers of tonality, stick with these images and do not waver. Hats and shoes work for me, but you may prefer saxophones, lampshades, or camels. Experiment. Find out what works for you and stick with it. Conclusion. To conclude this chapter, here is a list of action steps for immediate implementation on your journey toward memorizing vocabulary, regardless of the language. 1. Don't do anything until you've fully and clearly understood how to use location, imagination, and action in order to effectively memorize at least 10 items. 2. Take your time creating the individual locations and stations within the locations. It will take between 1 to 5 hours to come up with 28 locations and at least 10 stations within each location. But you can speed up the process by being relaxed while you create. Your mind has everything that you need, so long as you can push your critical mind aside and let your creative mind work. Please realize that it is not absolutely necessary to devise all 28 palaces straight away. But I prefer that my memory students have all 28 set up in advance, so that they are ready to pop new words in without thinking about the process when they want to memorize a word. But I know that some people want to focus more selectively on just the letters A through H. Such deliberate focus is perfectly fine, too. Whether you choose to complete all 28 letters or just a portion of the alphabet, grab your free magnetic memory worksheets. These worksheets will literally do all the work for you. 3. Ensure that your journey in each and every memory palace can be undertaken without crossing your own path or getting trapped. It is tempting to think that one can get away with circling around the forward trajectory of a path, but in the long run, this will only confuse matters. Strive for clear, crisp, and direct journeys, so that you don't need to think about what belongs where. Remember, the fewer things you have to remember, the easier it will be to recall the vocabulary words you have placed in palaces. 4. Use Word or Excel or a handwritten document for each memory palace. Start with the first location and proceed linearly from there. Don't forget that the purpose of this part of the process is twofold. First, preparing a written record will help you build your memory palaces with much greater detail than doing it in your imagination alone. Second, your written record will allow you to test the words you have placed in your mind. 5. Examine the grammatical variations of the words you've chosen to place in your palace. Will you need to remember the gender? Is it a verb that will need declension? Allow your imagination to take the principles you have been learning from this book and show you the best imagery for memorizing these different structural elements of any given word. Use relaxation to facilitate the process. 6. At the risk of being repetitive, please make sure that you are using the location, imagination, and action principles. I mentor many people, and a significant number of them report or demonstrate that they've fallen back on rote learning. They are repeating the words to themselves again and again rather than engaging the system I've taught them. Believe it or not, both the mind and the body find this very stressful, contributing to fight or flight responses, frustration, and ultimately failure. Future chapters describe a number of supplementary exercises that you can use to train your memory in greater depth if you feel that you need more training. I can tell you that if I hadn't gone through these exercises myself, I never would have devised the 28-letter memory palace system in the first place, let alone developed any skill with acquiring a second and third language. They may not seem related, but think of it as the relationship between push-ups and boxing. Pushing the floor away from the body is one of the best ways to strengthen your punch, even though it's a completely different movement. 7. Where applicable, learn the genders and tonalities of every word right away. Decide upon what images you will use to indicate these features of the language and use them consistently. This will become second nature. You don't have to use the images I've suggested. Go with whatever your imagination brings to you naturally. 8. Decide upon a focus. I recommend that you make adjectives a priority. Nouns and verbs are great, and you will need them, but adjectives allow you to flavor your speaking and deepen your understanding of innuendo and metaphor. When you do work with verbs, pick strong verbs and learn more than one version of each. Instead of just run, also learn jog and sprint. As for nouns, use a visual dictionary to find your words. This will help you be more selective in the words you choose and give your imagination more fodder for making memorable associations. 9. Sit with the dictionary as often as possible. When you have worked out your 28-letter memory palaces in advance, you are literally going to siphon the dictionary into your mind. Although many words may fail to capture your interest, there is no need to fight with them. Simply find the words that interest you the most or that you think will be the most useful and focus on them. Even if you skip a dozen words in a row, you can always go back to them. Focus on steady progress rather than being a completionist. Never allow frustration to enter the picture. 10. Many words you will encounter can mean several things at once. Focus on just one meaning at a time, or use compounding to capture several meanings at the same time once your skills are sufficiently advanced. If you feel that you should stick with just one meaning, you can always go back to gather more meanings at a later time. 11. Go to the library, Netflix, YouTube, or a store that sells DVDs and stock up on programs in the target language. Mixing memory palaces with as much immersion as possible will make for great strides in your learning. Likewise, learners can listen to audiobooks, read comics, seek out bilingual editions of novels, and listen to music in Arabic. There are endless possibilities, and you will be glad that you have taken this extra step. 12. Be careful that the images you use actually help you remember the meanings of the words. It's a painful experience to have installed familiarity with the sound and spelling of a word only to forget what it means. It's one thing to remember that a crazy word like epinadiplosis has something to do with anaconda in your memory palace, to take an example from English. But if you can't remember that it refers to the repetition of the first word of a sentence at the end of the sentence, then time, effort, and energy has been lost. Note, although I advocate sitting with a dictionary and memorizing key words in alphabetical order, not everyone does, and, admittedly, some interesting ideas emerge. Anne Merritt, for example, talks about clustering words in an article she wrote for the Telegraph. Merritt points out that one risks being all over the place by using word-a-day email services because so many themes get mixed together. Her proposed solution is to gather together clusters of related words. For example, you could focus on words related to health, education, a particular sport, or any particular category you like that is thematically related. My response to this notion is that it is not only a great idea, but one that gels with and complements the alphabetical memory palace technique taught in this book. Using this approach, all the memorizer needs to do is gather together words based on a theme that start with the same letter, and then place them in palace accordingly. This will aid recall. Conversely, one can gather thematically related words that do not start with the same letter and still divide them into your predetermined locations based on their alphabetical order. As it happens, I've created a document that gathers together 88 themes that you can use to gather interesting vocabulary words. This is not your usual run-of-the-mill travel vocabulary stuff that will bore the socks off you. If you'd like to receive this document, send me a quick email that has "Send me the themes" in the subject line. With respect to themes versus alphabetization, I can only speak for myself and certainly do not lay out final judgment on what other people do or how they use the magnetic memory method. My goal is to memorize the entirety of the languages I study. And even if I don't memorize all the words, reading through one or more dictionaries deeply familiarizes a person with the language in ways that listening to television and watching radio never will. Okay, listening to television and watching radio is a ridiculous spoonerism, but I reverse their order just to see if you're awake. Are you? My own memorization preferences aside, as mentioned in the introduction, the key to memorization is to take the basic techniques and always remain alert to opportunities to expand and improve them. Your fluency and your exercise-hungry brain will thank you for it.